how are you holding boundaries now with your kids without using the threat of physical punishment?
So that's a big question, and it goes in line with patience. So I'll go in a couple different directions here. So I just launched a course on creating more patience,
Mhm.
and basically what I did was I took 600 and something podcast guests, all the parenting experts we've had, everything that we've learned in our mastermind from experts and that kind of thing, and I literally weeded it down to 37-minute course. So what I can tell you, number one, patience is not a feeling. Most of us are like, ah, like I should be more patient, or why can't I be more patient? Why can't I have the feeling of patience? It's not even in our DNA to have patience. Patience is a skill that we hone, right? And so I'll give you an example of a few things in the course. Patience can be built actually throughout the day. So patience, your level of patience starts the moment your feet hit the ground in the morning. So I'll give you an example. I do not check my phone or social media or anything until 8 a.m. and I wake up at 4 every morning. Those 4 hours are strictly for morning routine, self-care, journaling, and all that good stuff, right? So not that I need 4 hours to journal, but I take like 10 minutes. But no social media. The reason for that is because, or emails or text messages or anything. And that, unfortunately, is the one thing that people do. They grab this thing first because it's also their alarm clock. And what happens is when you're on social media or text or email, doesn't matter, you're being agitated. Your fight or flight response is actually being agitated. You could see something on social media. It's like somebody's highlight reel that you can't stand. You're like, ugh. Or you get an email from your boss. Hey, I need this report today. It's due today. Or you get that text message like, hey, I need you to do this real quick. Why you were supposed to get back to me yesterday. You immediately are in a fight or flight response from the moment you get out of bed. And you've basically set the stage for the entire day that you're probably not going to respond very positively to anyone. So if anything, have a very solid morning routine and don't consume any news. Don't consume any social media. Don't be on anybody else's agenda for at least a couple hours. If you can, at least 60 minutes, right?
Mhm.
The other thing too is there are ways to recognize when you're being triggered. We're all triggered. We're triggered all day long. But there are physical and mental and emotional triggers that we feel. Like, so for instance, when I'm getting agitated, I'll start to have incomplete thoughts. My heart rate will go up. My hands will start to sweat. I'll start to like clench my fists, right? I'll feel myself getting heated up. Now, in order to interrupt that pattern, if my kids are doing something where I'm getting, ticked off, a lot of us blame ourselves for getting internally impatient or upset or mad or annoyed. And it's not necessarily what's happening internally. It's, are you going to completely lose it externally? So we can do certain things like count backwards in threes from 50 to 0. Now, of course, you never get to 0, but if you go, 50, 47, 44, 41, 38, what you're doing is you're creating space between reaction and response. If you can
Mhm.
just create some space to think logically, you're less likely. Or box breathing is another one.
Mhm.
The other thing too is I'll use tactical empathy when I want to react. Because if my kid's flying off the wall and I'm pissed, be like, looks like you're really upset right now. Tell me what's going on. Versus
Mhm.
like, why are you crying? Stop. I'm not great at it all the time, but I do try to insert that. The other thing too is we will screw up. We will lose our patience, right? And
Yes.
when you do that, what a lot of men do, and then we do this quietly, is we sabotage the heck out of ourselves. Like, God, like why can't I be better at this? Why can't I be a better father? I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't react like that. And I just did two things in there. I asked myself a really poor question, like, why can't I be better? Why can't I do this? It's a really poor question. Our brains are like Google. If we ask questions like that, really poor answers are going to come back. You want to know why you're not patient? It's because, you're a
Mhm.
jerk. You're this, you're that. The other thing too is we should on ourselves. We take a big steaming pile of should on ourselves with our questions. I should do this. I shouldn't do that. So what I like to use is the how might we question, how might I question? the next time this happens, how might I be more patient?
Mm.
What did I miss? And then the final thing is an after action review. If you lose your cool, go back to all these different tactics and understand, where did I go wrong today? Like, I immediately checked my phone, and I was a maniac on email because I had to get back to all these people, and I was in fight or flight. I didn't recognize the triggers, and I didn't do X, Y, or Z. So that's number one, with patience. As far as creating psychological safety where your kids will tell you anything, I mean, I've got 2 teenagers now, and I am absolutely floored by the amount of information they'll share with me. Dishonesty, wrongdoings, all these things, then they'll come and tell me about it. But we live by a quote in this house. The quote is, "Your honesty and ownership is celebrated and not punished." So
Mhm.
if my kids come and tell me something, I applaud them, appreciate them, and acknowledge them for their courage. And we embrace that. Now, if there's wrongdoing, the deal is if you come and tell me, you won't be punished. The punishment is the natural consequence of whatever that is. But I'm not going to take away your phone. I'm not going to ground you. Everything is a status quo. Now, differently, if you're dishonest with me, that's a different story. But what I find is when you create that environment, the kids are very forthcoming. They tell me more information than sometimes I'm completely floored and shocked by the things that they'll share. But it all comes from your honesty and ownership is celebrated, not punished or shamed.
And that's wonderful because when they come and talk to you about things, they can learn, right? Instead of, if they're not punished, then they can learn. If they're kids, they're inevitably going to make mistakes. They're inevitably going to impede on other people's needs and do stupid, reckless, dumb, annoying things because they're kids. But if they can tell us about it, and they can tell us about it without fear of punishment, then they can learn, right? Then they're not in their fight or flight, response, and their whole brain is available to then be able to learn and to be able to actually have awareness of what are all the consequences of what I said or what I did, etc. And to deal with it. And it's beautiful also too, because when you're not using your power like that, it makes it so they're not resenting you, right? They're not saying, "Oh, now I did something wrong and I'm going to push back against you because you're making me feel terrible because now I can't do this, play Minecraft or watch YouTubers or whatever it is," right? Like, um, you know, I, you know, I'm looking instead that child's looking at themselves and saying, "Oh, I did this thing," and I can look at myself rather than push back against you and blame you, which is so beautiful. So I just want to highlight this, dear listener, because what Larry is talking about here with the idea of patience, starting with talking about patience and talking about our triggers, is saying that no good comes of us losing it, being impatient and yelling and those threats, but a lot of really good connecting things come, and a lot of learning comes from honesty and a flow of communication. Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Ianla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.